Okay, so in this video, I want to talk about the flow of recognition and the flow of wisdom. Eventually, what I'm going to have on here is an image of a circle. I'm going to take these four letters, these four symbols, and add a fifth one and create a circle. And then I'm going to have an arrow basically looping around in a counterclockwise direction, and then another one in a clockwise direction. And those respectively will be what I call the flow of recognition and the flow of wisdom. And what this is an attempt to do, in complete honesty, what this is kind of an image that's come to me that I'm trying to kind of contextualize or play with. The sense I've got of it right now is this is maybe an attempt to explain or kind of solve what seems like a paradox in call it the project or the desire to end suffering. Because when you hear, for example, if we want to phrase it in the Buddhist context, the second noble truth, that the cause of, the root of suffering is wanting, then you think, okay, well then what we need to do is essentially change our relationship with wanting. We need to want to stop wanting. We can see kind of right away how a potential paradox arises. And I don't think this is a real paradox, but I think it's one that the mind kind of puts up there either for a lack of full perspective or maybe even as a deterrent to engage in this task, which the mind senses may, infringe on the mind's hegemony a little bit. I don't know. But essentially it seems kind of contradictory or paradoxical to say, well, how do you get to stop wanting if the only way to stop wanting is to want to stop wanting? And this idea of these kind of clockwise, counterclockwise flow is a model I have that I think demonstrates how this can be done essentially through the intuition over time in coordination with the surrendering of the will or the wanting. So that's what I'm going to try to lay out here. Okay, so oneness, right, the all state, right, I've drawn a line around it. There's no line around it. This is oneness, this is oneness, you are oneness, everything is oneness. Oneness is the pervasive all state, including all my diagrams about it. Within oneness is God. God is the pervading, all creating, all experiencing perspective / intelligence of everything that is physical and experienceable. So, again, God, 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 all God. Spirit is where we start to get a little more private, or at least seemingly private. Again, everything is oneness, so there is no ultimate sense of privacy or exclusivity, but from the notion of perspective, if we're kind of grounding things in, well, what's my perspective and what is the perspective of others, kind of a relative notion of things, spirit is where we get into I believe, the level where there are perspectives which are not exclusive, but perhaps distinct between different beings. And then at the level of I, here's where I can get maybe most clear and most concrete. I, right? And then if you were to do this same thing and say I, right? I, Joe Clark, am not doing that, right? I'm not inside your body. I don't have the experience, right, from my perspective as being grounded in this body of doing that. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, although I'm feeling very tempted. But of course, from the perspective of oneness, or even God, I think there's actually, it's a little more complicated than that, or maybe a little richer than that. But let's work with this paradigm for now, right? Lowercase I is what I am and what you are, and when we see a meaningful distinction between us, right, what I think it really boils down to is I'm saying, hey, I see out of these eyes, I feel what's in this body, right? I think what's in this brain in a way that you do not, and vice versa is equally true. We both acknowledge and respect that. That's why I would say I'm an I and you're an I. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically take these and spread them across a circle, and then I'm going to add a letter, which is the letter E. And this letter E is going to stand for environment. I think it could also equally stand for energy, but for simplicity's sake, let me frame it as environment right now. So E is environment. What is environment? Right? It's what I, as a lowercase I, can seemingly engage through my senses, right? I see my hand appears to be out there, right? I see a ring on my finger that appears to be there. I see a cap on a pen, right? I can feel it, I can smell it, I can taste it, right? So the environment is what I can have a sensory relationship with. and what I can sense as being either objects or swaths of objects. And we can call it energy because, as we know from Einstein, right, E equals mc squared. Means energy is fundamentally the same thing as matter. In other words, there's a formula by which you can figure out how much energy is in matter, how much matter is in energy. And we know from the atomic bombs and other experiments that they can literally be converted one into the other. Okay. So we'll use E to stand for energy, environment. Again, this is what we might call our world, right? My surroundings, my physical thisness, right? Coming down into lowercase I, coming around into uppercase I, coming around into G, coming around into O. Okay. So, oneness, God, spirit, self, and environment. So, the flow of wisdom is the low, and let me switch my colors up here. Make this one red. So the flow of wisdom moves in this direction. Right? It's a loop. It's complete. And when I say the flow of wisdom, right? Anchor that word down here for myself. When I say wisdom, what I mean is concentrations of symbols or expressions that help us be better, that help us make wiser choices, that maybe help us feel more whole or open-hearted in that moment. It's kind of like little concentrated symbolic medicine or concentrated symbolic food. It's something that kind of comes and nourishes us on a deep level. And I think we've all had this experience. Sometimes they're harder to remember than others, especially if right now we're in a depressed or anxious or a bad mood. Wisdom can feel like such an abstract or distant thing, but I think if we all look deeply, we can all remember times when some thought has come to us, either within ourselves or from other people. An expression has been there. And I'm talking here about symbolic expression, but wisdom can take all forms. Wisdom can be purely behavioral. Wisdom can just be a look. And it's that thing that when you experience it, it makes you feel safer. And not necessarily like just safer in the sense of, oh, my body's safe, I'm not going to be harmed. Safe on a very deep level, like you're being held, like you're being comforted, like you're known. It can also be the opportunity for epiphany or profound insight. Wisdom can come, and for example, if you're a scientist, it can be something that gives you that profound breakthrough, right? When Einstein, for example, came up with E equals mc squared, I believe there was a flow of wisdom, right, in his experience that essentially brings either the formula or some other experience that allows the formula to kind of pop up in mind and to be like, holy cow, that's it, right? So wisdom is this higher order intelligence that comes down into our realm and basically lets us recognize on a deep level something that's good or helpful or healthy for us. It could be an aphorism, it could be a maxim. Again, it could just be a pat on the shoulder. Something that kind of steadies us, gets us out of some smaller kind of maze we're in or trap we're in, some kind of small confining environment, and expands things for us, right? Opens our horizons, broadens things. And the reason I have wisdom moving in this clockwise direction around the circle is because wisdom moves from a higher order of intelligence to a lower order of intelligence. And so oneness being the highest order of intelligence, why? Because it contains all possibilities, moving into God, which is omniscient, right? And omnipotent, omni-loving as well, but for this one, we'll just stick with omniscient. Spirit, which has a much higher order perspective, access to much more information than we do, confined here in the wetware brain, which literally, we can map how many connections it has, how many bits it can process. We can constantly encounter the limitations of our mind as it tries to picture things. Let's give an example. I might say, I want you to imagine the entirety of your home right now in all of its detail. Right, take a moment with that. Right, now what you can do is you can, in your imagination, have little flashes of rooms in your house. You may even be able to flash kind of the blueprint or an overview, but we cannot, in a moment, render the entirety of the home in our minds in a way that's fully explorable, right? And that's an indication, right, or kind of a sign that the mind is in a finite environment with finite processing capacity. It's got a number of tasks it's got to juggle. But even if we're able to concentrate the entirety of its power on a single task, there are tasks that are simply too complex and too complicated for the mind to undertake. And so this flow of wisdom, what I guess I'm trying to get across here is when we have those experiences of something coming into our perspective and into our environment that seems to just kind of open us up, give us this experience of grace, give us this experience of expansiveness or aha, just experience of deep comfort on a level that's beyond the physical, right? It's not the way like if you're really hungry and you bite into a corn dog and you get that, right? That's so brief, right? I mean, I guess it is a taste of that, but it's only a taste, right? Because it's only given to you by that brief hit of excitement in the brain of, oh man, I'm getting that kind of food or sensory experience I want, but it comes and it goes. Wisdom does that for us, but it lasts longer. And it hits us on deeper levels, and it's more abiding, because I think it's really speaking on a deep level to more foundational and expansive forms of intelligence that exist within us beyond what we can experience when we're only experiencing it through the physical wetware brain. So wisdom flows in this direction. Now, recognition is going to flow in the other direction. Let me see if I can get another color here. In my little bag. All right, green. So recognition, right, which requires as its kind of grist, as its raw material, empirical information, is going to start really at the relationship between the individual being and the individual being's environment, right, which is, you know, seeing things here. I'm looking into the camera, looking at my phone, looking at the reflected image in my phone, right? This is I engaging environment. And the way recognition works, right, it works in coordination with wisdom. So wisdom can be these concentrations of higher order pattern recognition. Like, for example, John Wooden, I think, is a great example. You know, I'm a UCLA fan, so I'm biased, but John Wooden really was an amazing person, an amazing coach, and he had this ability to distill wisdom down to words. And so one example you could see, look at his pyramid of success. He said, be quick, don't hurry. Right? Be quick, don't hurry. Right? 4 words. Right? Think about during our day how many words we'll often use. I mean, think about how many words I use in this video, for example, that end up being kind of like throwaway words. Right? You're trying to kind of get at something, but you're not really getting something across. And we may use 30 words, 100 words, 200 words. Think about what these 4 words do. Be quick, don't hurry. Right? If you've lived, right, and here's another way we know it's wisdom, right? You say that to like a 3-year-old, right? Maybe it does register on some level, right? And say it to a 7-year-old, say it to a 12-year-old, say it to a 20-year-old, say it to a 50-year-old, say it to an 80-year-old, right? You can imagine that, even if it's the same person across all those different times, that word, it's going to have a richness and a resonance. It's going to kind of, hit different light bulbs around the brain, because it really carries along something that if you have the experience of feeling like you're operating a body in space and time, that you are living a life that is coming and going in the passing of time, right? Then you have this experience of like, wow, that's really smart. Like, that's really a wise way to approach things. Because we know what it's like when we're hurrying, right? When we're hurrying, we're frantic, we can get tunnel vision. Our brain can feel like a popcorn machine, like a tornado. It can be so hard to have sustained, coherent thoughts. We also, though, know that the reality of things is it's very difficult to be always slow and deliberate and plodding. I think there are levels of kind of inner consciousness achievement where maybe you actually always have that state, but speaking for the rest of us that don't have that, we know that there's this sweet spot where we're able to adapt with and move with and flow with the exigencies and speeds of time, but without losing ourselves to the panic and to the hurry, which then compromises our ability to actually maintain that sync and to make choices within that rapid flow of time. And if you look at what a great quarterback does, like in football, they're standing there, they take the ball, right? They've got all these 280-pound dudes bearing down on them, and they're trying to look at someone 30 or 40 yards downfield and deliver a ball into a window this big while those 4 dudes are breathing and stomping and snorting and getting closer and closer and closer, right? In football, literally the quarterback stands inside a pocket, which is like this. His linemen are around him trying to block the people from coming in, and the quarterback is trying to look down and make this very, very intricate decision followed by an intricate physical move while standing under that pressure. No wonder it's such a difficult job, and the folks who can do it get paid millions of bucks. And if that quarterback can be quick, right, because, hey, the guys are bearing in. If your guy is open, he may not be open for long, so you got to be quick. But if you hurry, right, that's when the quarterback throws an interception. That's when the quarterback, right, makes a wrong decision, right, maybe panics and runs right into one of the defensive linemen who tackles him. Right, so be quick, don't hurry, right? Respect time and respect the mind. Right? If you hurry the mind, it's going to suffer, right? And if you don't respect time, then you won't give the mind the opportunity to make the move it wants to in time. Be quick, don't hurry. Wisdom, right? Recognition is when we empirically can recognize an opportunity to practice that, right? Or recognize that dynamic in action. So perhaps I am, in this example, the quarterback. And I'm using quarterback. You can use, a CEO in a boardroom. You could use someone who's operating a cash register in a restaurant during a particularly busy time, right? Or the cook in the back who's trying to handle things. A little tangent here. Recommend the poem Short Order Cook. I believe the gentleman's last name is Daniels. I apologize, I'm blanking on it right now. But that one kind of captures this experience of the flow of be quick, don't hurry, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm the quarterback. I'm looking at my environment, which is those linemen bearing down on me, my receiver running his route downfield, the ball in my hand, my sense of how much time I have, the sense of when the timing will be perfect to move through. And I may have this flash point of recognition, aha. This is a moment where there's time pressure and there's mental pressure. This little formula of be quick, don't hurry, right, this wisdom may serve me in this moment and help me make better decisions. And so this then is kind of this little flash point here, right, where the wisdom, wrong color there, the wisdom of be quick, don't hurry, moving in that direction from the higher order intelligence down, right? It's kind of like a parent to a child, right? Kind of giving you a little pearl of wisdom that saves you from having to make certain mistakes on your own. Well, we have this moment, and then we see, aha, I'm in that situation right now. I have a combination of time pressure and mental pressure, and so my little flash point is that epiphany of, okay, I'm going to trust that wisdom in this moment, right, to help me through. And I think that what we see here, and let me tie it back to kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. Let me actually take a breath. Let me try to be quick without hurrying. So what we're seeing here is that on this level of I, this flashpoint, I think, goes up into spirit, goes up into God, and goes up into oneness as this epiphany, this intersection, this flow combination between wisdom and recognition. And I think there's a bit of a degree of gratitude in the commonality of that, right? An appreciation, right? A recognition on these higher levels that the wisdom is actually working and serving. And so what you get is essentially oneness, God and spirit and body and environment flowing this way in a recognition of the wisdom's wisdom, right? And then you have a flow this way from the empirical level, right? The quarterback, the surfer, whatever you want to say, the person at the cash register, having the physical experience of being under mental and physical pressure, applying the wisdom, right? And then basically kicking back information upstream, saying, hey, that actually works. That actually serves. So in other words, in this direction, we're saying, oh, that's appropriate in this moment. And then in this direction, we're saying, hey, and it actually worked in this moment, right? Hey, this is something that could serve you here. Wow, that actually did serve me here. And so what I think is happening when you have these loops working upwards and backwards from the empirical up to kind of the ethereal, from the higher order intelligence down to the lower order intelligence, I think really what we're doing here is we have intuition. And maybe I'll get a little cute here. I'm going to take the dot on this I in the word intuition, and I'm going to keep that in the center. But this dot, let this represent, right, the intuition. And the intuition is this deep form of intelligence that is below the discursive form of intelligence that I'm using right now, for example, try to get my message across. The intuition does not often work in sentences, or at least it doesn't get stuck in sentences for long, because the intuition is much more like a spider with its web. It is able to sit in the center of that web and to feel, perhaps even simultaneously, multiple disturbances or multiple activities across that web. And it is able, sitting in the center of that web, with just the slightest disturbance, its intuition is so sensitive and so calibrated that it may immediately be able to sense not just whether an insect is hit, it may be able to sense the weight of that insect, if it knows its environment well enough, if its intuition has been calibrated through recognition and wisdom, it may say that's a moth. It may even say that's an adult moth. It may then be able to sense, based on the fluttering, how well the moth is entangled in the web, how far away on the web it is, how likely the moth is to break out of the web in a short period of time. So in other words, does the spider have to be quick and not hurry to get to the moth in order to, bang it or stick its stinger in and tranquilize it, paralyze it, wrap it up, make its meal, right? All these things I believe are happening in the spider's intelligence, but the spider isn't a blah, 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 sentence, premise, therefore, conclusion, right? It's not running discursive logic. It's not running a machine of if this, then that on any kind of conscious level that it symbolically represents, the way we do as human beings, and we kind of get lost in that game, I think. I certainly do. Shocker. Intuition is all of that happening at a level almost like a computer processor, and we're sitting there looking at the screen, right, maybe typing on Google Docs or Microsoft Word, typing an email, and we're hitting the letter T on the keyboard, and we're seeing the letter T appear on the screen. Intuition is the processing behind the scenes that allows all that to happen. And it can operate at speeds and levels of complexity that the discursive operating mind cannot even comprehend, because it's stuck in its plotting, discursive, kind of Boolean logic. Okay, so intuition is essentially that spider, right, that gets trained, right, on its web. Right, here's its web. How am I doing on my spider web? And so intuition is attuned to the flow of wisdom. Intuition is attuned to the flow of recognition. Intuition experiences that as little plinks, little activity across its web. And it learns. It learns through repetition and time, right? Occurrence and time. pattern recognition and time. That's similar, that's different. That's kind of similar, that's kind of different. That's similar in this way, different in that way, right? It is constantly undergoing this experimentation, but not deliberately. Its experimentation is entirely passive. It sits in the middle of its web and it waits for data to arrive, right? Recognition. And then it allows its past data, right, its past intelligence, which it is perhaps concentrated into little rules or meta patterns, to then inform it. And whereas a spider, maybe on the 5th day of its life, may feel something hit the web, and it may just know, hey, there's a disturbance on the web to my right, right? You may think of that young quarterback sitting in the pocket, and that young quarterback may just see the receiver moving downfield and go, okay, receiver's open, but doesn't know how open, doesn't know how much time before the quarterback gets sacked by the defensive lineman, may not have a sense that that's the receiver's out of the 30 yards away, so I need to throw the ball 52 yards to get there, right? These are all on the intuitive level of things that get baked into the quarterback's brain, get grooved into the quarterback's brain. How? Repetition, 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 the flow of recognition, the flow of wisdom, gradually fine-tuning that intuition, so that in a flash, that same spider, who when something hit its web when the spider was 5 days old and the spider goes, ooh, web activity to the right, when that spider is 5 months old, heck, maybe even 5 years old, if spiders live that long, I don't know, but 5 months, 5 years, at 5 months it's saying, ooh, that's a moth. At 5 years, and I'm saying, at 5 years it realizes in a flash, right? It's not saying it, it's just boom, it knows that's a moth. It's an adult moth. It is about 6 inches from me, and I have about 2 seconds to get there and sting it. Otherwise, it's got a good chance of maybe not only getting away, but destroying my web and getting rid of those few other smaller meals that I didn't attend to yet. How does a spider, right, which cannot utter a word, cannot think a deliberate thought, we think, or at least I think so, right? How does a spider accomplish that? Intuition. How does intuition accomplish that? Data, recognition, flowing upward into higher orders of intelligence distilling patterns and rules it sees, from that back down, and in that intersection, right, in that flow, kind of this gyroscope that we have here, the spider sits in the middle of its web, and through its intuition is able to delicately engage with, interact with its environment, and achieve its purpose of keeping itself and its body alive. Okay, I promised that this was going to be about the second noble truth and solving the paradox or the seeming contradiction of, well, how do you stop wanting if the first step to stopping wanting is to want to stop wanting? And I think what we can find here is, maybe this kind of ties back to the spider web. This is a spider getting stuck in the web of its own thoughts. Right? This is a spider, instead of trusting intuition and time, it's trying to spin reasoning and logic. But right at the gate, what it's doing is it's crossing two of its webs in front of itself, and then it's getting stuck. It's saying, okay, I need to stop wanting, but it believes the only way it can put itself toward a purpose is to want in the beginning, right? Or that wanting in the beginning means I need to pursue a deliberate path that's always conscious of this wanting, always aiming toward this wanting, and so I'll never get anywhere. I can't even start. Why bother, right? This is kind of how we also talk ourselves out of going to the gym or doing errands we know we should do, right? We come up with some little riddle or puzzle in the mind that the mind can't solve. Oh, if I do this, I can't do that. And then, oh, look, something shiny, or, let's go on our phones or distract ourselves. Okay, so if we tell ourselves as well, I want to stop wanting, but then I'm wanting again. Oh, it's a contradiction. I can't do it. That's the mind being lazy and avoidant. What we do is we say, no, I'm going to stop wanting the way a spider is going to learn to recognize a moth at 6 inches and know perhaps the moth's weight and the moth's power. Repetition and time with a centeredness and a common focus and a common goal. I'm going to sit in the middle of my web, right, which is the heart sitting in the middle of the body, right? If we want to get a little poetic, maybe we could say the rib cage is kind of like the web around it, protecting it, stretching it a little bit. But we're going to be the heart in the middle of the body, right? We're not going to be just this brain up here, which wakes up every day and has its to-do lists and thinks, how do I do this? How do I do that? And gets frustrated when it can't see the path forward, or it feels like, hey, I'm not going to get the credit for the job being done, right? This is where we can get stuck our entire lives. This learns the way the spider learns, in time. This is upset and frustrated by time. It wants things now. It wants shortcuts. It wants to use wisdom to basically act like nitrous in a car engine, get me there faster, move me along. Instead of what the spider does, which is the spider uses wisdom to enrich its intelligence, to make its intelligence more intricate, right? To make its sensitivities more finely tuned and better calibrated to the reality of its world, right? The spider isn't trying to solve problems in quantum physics. The spider isn't trying to be a tiger. The spider is recognizing it's a spider, right? And it's not getting caught up in concepts of what does it mean to be a spider. The spider is sitting on its damn web, feeling things hit it, right? The heart, beating in time, is feeling things come and go, right? Sensing opportunities coming and going, right? Sensing our emotions coming and going. And what I think we do when we surrender to, call it a spiritual path, call it a path of redemption, call it just maybe surrendering to the flow of time, or maybe I think this also maybe is what happens with folks who are struggling with chemical addictions or behavioral addictions when we say we hit bottom. Let me take a breath here because I feel myself being hurrying, not quicking. I think those surrenders is when we say, I'm done with this maze. I'm done with this labyrinth. I keep running into the damn Minotaur and he keeps kicking my damn ass. I want to get back to my heart. And I want to be the spider. And if that means I got to sit here and I got to learn by trial and error again and again and again, then that's what I'm going to do. And the key here is the thing we have, the temptation we have that the spider doesn't have, is we can always go from here, right, to the heart, up into the noggin. Right? The noodle is always available and it's always calling. And this is the discipline of the mind that I think the Buddha was calling for. The spider doesn't have that temptation, right? The spider sits in the web and kind of carries out its evolutionary programming, right? Sits there and allows all the different things to hit, allows it to feel. It then goes and explores. Maybe it had a theory, right? Ooh, I think that's a moth. Oh, nope, that was just a butterfly or something else. And then it learns, right? That recognition goes up, right? The wisdom then distills it over higher order patterns, sends it down, and then gradually the spider learns how to handle the moth. We as human beings have this additional challenge that even if we're sitting on our spider heart, right? And we have our webs going out into the entirety, I believe, not just of our bodies and our minds, but out into the entirety of our field of awareness, or the entirety of our environment is our web to some level, because we, through our senses, can recognize patterns in it. And if we are constantly jumping the gun and trying to go up into the mind and trying to hurry wisdom, right? Trying to speed wisdom along, trying to force wisdom, we never allow our intuitions to calibrate the way they need to. And this, I think, is the way to solve the paradox or the riddle of this second truth, and it's surrendering to the flow of time. Not treating time as some thing that's moving along too slowly or sometimes too quickly. And what we have to do is get above it or beyond it or transcend it or escape it. Seeing time as our medium. Seeing time as our flow. Seeing time as our web. Seeing time ultimately as our friend. And seeing experience, right, and recognition as our tools for training our intuition to be better in the flow of time. And seeing wisdom as the gift and the grace, kind of the reaping of what we sow. If what we sow is repeated, committed intention to sit in the heart, to sit in the middle of our spider web, right? And to return there again and again, and to allow in the flow of time our heart, right, our deepest and truest self, to calibrate itself to our world, to learn how our world works, to learn what's important to us and to our beingness, not just in the level of our physical body, right? Our calories are important, our water is important, our sense of reproduction is important because that's been baked into our DNA, into our evolution. But what are our priorities more on the spirit level? What are our priorities on the God level, right? And this may be something that I talked about being a human almost kind of like being a curse, because we can sit in the heart, but the noodle is always tempting, right? The siren song is always calling from the rocks to leave the seat of the heart, right? And to steer the ship of our attention onto the rocks of the mind, of the brain, right? The blessing is, on the flip side, is I don't know if the spider is able to appreciate as richly its experience of being spirit, of being God, and being oneness. I think that's one of the gifts we have of being human. And you see this with folks, with the Buddha maybe being the extreme example, but a lot of other folks along the continuum who are able to connect and directly experience what it's like to be viewing the world from the spirit perspective, from the God perspective, or to be able to experience the full immersion, that oceanic consciousness of the oneness. We as human beings can actually be aware that we're in that state while we're in it, which can provide a level and an experience of transcendence, really something beyond words, that maybe that the spider consciousness doesn't have, right? So I make it sound like being human maybe was all bad, but upsides and downsides, right? And so as we, in our hearts, gradually attune ourselves, not just to our physical environment, but then also get experiences of having awareness here, and having awareness here, and having awareness here, recognizing that, getting wisdom to how to recognize when you're there, and wow, what kind of attitudes or resonances allow me to remain and kind of remain on the wave of this. If we think of this like an ocean wave that we're surfing, right? How do I catch that wave? How do I stay on that wave, right? How do I protect myself when I'm on that wave? All those things. I think it's this combination of recognition, right? Raw empirical data, wisdom, the distillation of rules and patterns based on that data, and then intuition, being in the middle of that flow, right? Not getting absorbed discursively in the words, right? Be quick, don't hurry. Is there a comma in between? Should I make it my mantra? Should I say it? Notice how this is all discursive noodle stuff. We sit in the gyroscope, right? We allow that to be around us, and what we do is we sit in the middle of that physical experience, right? And we do the only thing we can ever really do, which is trial and error, which is in a given moment, being on our web, having the best reading we can, responding the best way we can, right? And allowing the learning to happen. And notice, this is why I think the great athletes talk about having like the goldfish memory, right? You watch the tape, right? Boom, the moth hits, I come over, maybe I'm too slow. Maybe it hits, I think it's a moth, so I'm preparing to handle it like it's a moth, but it's something else. It's a bat, or it's a bird, or it's a butterfly, and I'm ill-prepared. Maybe I get wounded in the experience. Right? Maybe I lose out on my meal that day. The mistake of learning here, and this is what we do in our depression and our anxiety and our confusion, is we go up into the mind and we try to squeeze it like a lemon to say, give me my wisdom, give me my teaching, give me my lesson here, right? Because we want to force it so quickly because we say, I don't want that to ever happen again. I don't want to ever experience that again, right? Maybe from a position of pride or vanity, that was embarrassing, right? Oh God, that was terrible, that wounded my ego, right? We don't admit that, but we just say, oh, that was terrible, that was awful. Or from the level of shame, we feel bad about ourselves. Oh, I'm so stupid. How could I have made that mistake? I've made that mistake 30 times. How did I make that damn mistake again? But if you could be the God to this spider, right? If you could be the God to your own heart, and you could give it some wisdom, you could give it a teaching, wouldn't the teaching you give it to say, hey, look, yeah, go over your experience, study the film, study the tape, look at it, be honest with yourself, right, about what happened, but don't get too hung up on it, right? Hey, get back to the center of your web. Stuff's happening. There may be a delicious, delicious mosquito or something like that, right, or a horsefly that just landed up there. And while I'm over here, right, fretting about what happened with that moth, I'm missing out on other opportunities. And while I'm sitting here, I'm kind of breaking my trust in my intuition, right? I'm breaking my trust with the flow of time. I'm saying, no. I'm not going to allow trial and error to happen anymore. I'm going to force myself to stop making this mistake now, and I'm going to essentially beat myself up, right? Shove my face in the memory of this experience and loop this tape over and over and over until I get it now. I want it now, right? This is the sin of Lucifer, right? Lucifer's destiny was to return to God and to be God. This is the destiny of all things. What was Lucifer's mistake? Lucifer said, no. I want to be God now. I need to be God now, right? Hurrying, right? Hurrying. Be quick. Don't hurry, right? And so when we talk about not obsessing over our mistakes, right, or obsessing over our successes, right, not obsessing over what's happening, I think sometimes we take that as like, I don't know, I think something about that to me, maybe this is just my ego, it feels like definitely my ego, but it's like, it's insulting. Like, what are you saying? I can't figure it out? You're saying I can't get to the bottom of it? And it's like, no, we're not saying that. It's just saying if you were to able to see the bigger picture and understand the fundamental differences between the experiences of being in the heart and being stuck in the labyrinth of the mind, you wouldn't wish that upon your worst enemy. And so wisdom on some level is also this higher order intelligences freeing the being from feeling like it has to beat itself up and get all its wisdom now. It's saying surrender into the flow of time. Surrender into the process of trial and error. Surrender into the gathering of data for recognition. Surrender into the trickle of wisdom down in a way you cannot control. Right? The grace falls, right, like manna from the clouds of heaven, if I'm getting that right. But we can't shoot cannons up into the clouds and force it to come, right? We need to trust it. And what I hope I'm doing with this framework is giving the mind a bit of an assurance as to why this is wise and why it's not some capitulation or some kind of white flag surrender of shame. It's a surrender that isn't a defeat. It's a surrender that's actually a gift to yourself because you're seeing the dynamics on a higher level of how the heart works versus how the brain works. And what I think we all know deep down is we all have a stubborn little SOB inside of us, right? And let's not act like this is a mistake. I think this is also a gift from God in oneness because there's something in us that wants to do it ourselves, right? From young age as children, we see this. I want to do it myself. I want to have it myself. And again, like all things, I think there's kind of a light side and a dark side to this. I think the dark side is the vanity, right? Of wanting to be able to sell ourselves stories of power and control and goodness and competence and all those things. I did it myself. I could stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need other people. I don't need other things. I'm the greatest, all those things, right? But then I think there's also something in it. It's a deep level of trial and error. It's the trial and error of discovering the wisdom of trial and error on a very deep level. And the ironic part about it and why the lesson is so hard to get is that the wisdom is in the error, right? This is why we always talk about the wisdom of failing, because you have to have enough error to experience trying to deal with error in the brain and trying to squeeze the drops of wisdom out of it right now. What did I do wrong? How was that wrong? And to feel how many foolish notions we put in our heads, how long we loop in our brains. You have to allow the raw data of being the spider off the web, of being the spider that's moving around, the spider that's trying to be a tiger, right? The spider that's trying to be a human being, the spider that's trying to pretend it's not a spider at all, right? And settling into the middle of that web, right? Surrendering into the wisdom of being in that web for us as human beings with these big noodly labyrinthine brains requires error. Not just error of what was my goal and what happened, but also error of, okay, something happened, what was my response? Like something good happened, what did I do? Did I obsess over it and tell myself stories about how great I am? How did that work out? How did that go? Did I sit up here telling stories about how terrible I was because I messed up? Did I try from one instance to come up with this elaborate scheme or rules? Okay, here's the right thing to go going forward, right? Think about that. That's a lower order intelligence trying to tell a higher order intelligence story. Why? Because it doesn't want to experience that again. It doesn't want to feel that failure again. And what that child, that kind of youthful, immature experiencing mode can't understand is that it's really digging its own grave. But what I think we can look at from a remove is to realize that those meta errors, those responsive errors of not just erring in our environment, right? Oops, I tried to compliment someone and I offended them. Whoops. The error really is then forcing that to be in the mind, right? Forcing the mind to then solve the problem for us right away because we're like, oh, I never want that to happen again. And that error too is another error in this trial and error process. In other words, we need to go through the double error of environmental error and then responsive error to realize eventually, and this, the wild thing about this is this may take us many, many lifetimes, right? Many, many karmic reboots before we kind of just accept on this intuitive level, God, that shit just doesn't work. Not only does it not work, it makes me miserable. It makes me make worse decisions. It takes me out of the flow of my life. It makes me neurotic. It makes me abusive to myself and others. I mean, I truly believe that the source of all suffering in the world is essentially that dynamic then played out on scales farther and farther removed from the individual. I mean, I think you can see entire nations and system of laws that are built on this kind of small-minded notion of not realizing that the error in the response to the other error is actually what perpetuates the error further and creates much more problems than that individual environmental error ever did. Because what you're doing is you're baking rules into your system that can be really difficult to get out. We're cementing beliefs into our system that can be really hard to uproot, and those beliefs then compound errors both in behavior and in response to behavior. All right, let me take a breath here. See if there's anything more I wanted to sprinkle on this. All right, so what are the takeaways here? Is it wise to suggest takeaways, given what I talk about? Is that an ironic example of an error? Maybe. I think what I want to say is a couple things. One, I believe our wisdom is to be the spider in the middle of the web, to be the heart in the middle of the web. Don't think of the web just as your body. The web is everything, everything literally, including all the stuff you see around you, and your heart can read that and know that, even if the heart is confined physically to the body. The heart's wisdom, the heart's intuition and knowledge is not. It learns even when the discursive brain doesn't realize it's learning, right? So learn to retrust intuition, right? By re-going into the heart. Learn to trust the flow of recognition, the flow of wisdom. This is where faith and patience can really serve, because when that wisdom isn't coming fast enough, right, it can take faith and patience to calm ourselves down. And when we calm ourselves down and get back into the heart, we remember, aha, the wisdom comes in its perfect time, right? This flow of time, this gyroscope, works perfectly because God and oneness are designing it and designing it for our benefit. It can seem like it's cruel for God to abandon us to so much error, especially so much self-perpetuated error. But God is teaching us to be something greater than ourselves. God is actually teaching us, to be spirit. God is teaching us gradually to re-become God and to re-become oneness. And what we've done is, with God, we are God. What we've essentially done is kind of put ourselves into the middle of this kind of puzzle or world of ignorance where we can't see from God's perspective. We don't have omniscience and omnipotence. We're here, we're finite, right? We're operating in time, we're operating in space. We have real needs, right? If we don't fill our belly, we die. Right? If we don't read the web right, we don't feed our belly. Right? So we've got to learn. But we trust and we surrender to the wisdom of allowing time to unfold and to letting our intuition do the work that the brain, the discursive brain, was never designed to do to begin with. And this is hard because we're addicted to this. We're addicted to noodling. We're addicted to the vanity too, and the vanity and the noodling work together. Because the noodling keeps us constantly making those meta mistakes, which vanity then feeds off of, kind of like a spider, because it then gets to sell pride and shame stories about how our response was so much better or so much worse than before, so much better or worse than we deserve, etc., etc. Break that addiction. Breaking that addiction is hard. Breaking that addiction is hard. See it on my face, it's real fucking hard. Sorry. And breaking that addiction is especially hard when you try to break it here. If I can allow a little wisdom, I'm going to try not to cry in all these videos, but a little wisdom to flow into the recognition I'm having right now is that I try to break it here. And this stuff can become a game I play in my mind to try to break my addiction to solving what I see as the problems of my life here, and what I pray for myself, and what I give myself the permission to do, and what I empower myself to do, is to unconditionally be here, to let my energy come down in its time here, to allow myself to be here, to trust this, and to love and forgive this, and to allow again and again and again and again a move here, a trust here, a flow here, a process here, and to recognize that this process here involves again and again getting spit back out like Jonah out of the whale. We go up, we come down, we engage with those higher orders of intelligence, and then we feel grounded again back in our body, and that suffering, right? That suffering which we're trying to escape, which I'm trying to escape here. Again and again, we get put down and we get told, go back to your web. Go back to your web. Come back to your web. And really it's only after getting spit out of that whale for the trillionth time, right? Hitting bottom, getting to the point where you're like, this is not a puzzle I can solve. This is where the addiction is, so this can't solve the addiction, right? What's the first step of the 12 steps? Surrendering to a higher power, right? That's what I think this is to some extent too. And we surrender, and we don't have to surrender with shame, although if we surrender with shame to the beginning, we can know that when we get back into the middle of the web, we're not going to hold on to that shame, right? Because the shame's a kind of a venom here. Get back to the web, get back to the heart. Let the failures and successes, and was that a failure or success? Let it happen. Trust recognition to feed the higher order intelligences. Trust the higher order intelligences to feed wisdom back down in the perfect flow of time. This is not some accident. Right? All this clockwork I'm talking about, these gears turning, these are all the handiwork of God in oneness. And if it seems cruel, or it seems sadistic, or if it seems like torture, A, that's a symptom that we're thinking of it from here. B, that's a sign we're not thinking of it here. And C, well, aren't I in the middle of my web right now? And there's that thought. This is torture. God is torturing me. This is unfair. I'm the spider in my web. That's a little tingle on my web, that thought. Do I want to go chase that? Do I want to go chase that thought? And the irony is, in this moment with this framework, I'm able to not do it, but in the flow of my life, it's hard. What do these teach me? That if I do, that if I'm a fool, again, be kind to myself. Be my friend through the process. I don't need to pretend like I think it's a smart decision. If I watch myself doing that, I don't need to give myself some phony friendly encouragement. But is it wise to beat myself up? To scold myself? To be disappointed in myself? I define disappointment as fleeing the middle of this web out of discouragement, out of frustration, of leaving the heart and going up into the mind, or just numbing the heart out because I feel like that's too much. I'm sick of this. So am I, when the spider of my body goes out, or the spider of my mental attentive energy leaves my heart again to go into my mind to play some game? Do I, my deeper heart, my heart of hearts, get frustrated? God damn it. And leave too? Or do I stay and hold my heart center? Do I keep finding deeper and deeper hearts within myself? Right? Spider within the spider, within the spider, within the spider. Maybe it's spiders all the way down, right? And do I say, maybe I've seen 50 versions of myself. Maybe I watch that, and then I watch the disappointment, then I watch the meta-disappointment, then I watch the existential angst, and I watched it all. I recognized the pattern. And my intuition, my wisdom has told me, stay. 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 And I stay. And I hold space in the middle of the web for all those things to return. I hold the space. Right? I'm kind of the torch in the darkness. Right? And no matter how far out they are in the desert of this, they see that torch and they know they can return. I'll leave it there. Thank you.